What's up, everyone? So about a month ago, during the German round of the MotoGP World Championship, MotoGP's new support class, the Moto E World Cup, finally had its inaugural race. It's a spec class series in that all riders are racing on the same electric bike, which is provided by the Energica motor company based out of Italy. The bike itself is the Energica Ego, which admittedly I didn't really know much about that bike up until that first race. I knew that Dorna was developing Moto E, but I didn't really keep my finger on the pulse too much. Now, suffice it to say, the launch of Moto E was a relative success, and it really piqued my interest for the Ego. So I did what any sucker consumer would do next. I got on the web and I tried to read up as much as I can about it. And lo and behold, I find out that they're already in distribution in the US and that one of my local dealers is an official dealer for Energica. So of course I shot off a request for a test ride, and CalMoto off of Mountain View was quick enough to respond and accommodate my request. So after 1 week of watching the bikes in action on track, I found myself actually sitting on one. Now, prior to this test ride, I have zero experience riding an electric motorcycle. I would say that the most experience I had with any full-size electric vehicle was when I spent a few weeks carpooling with a friend of mine to work, driving their Volkswagen e-Golf for them. I remember having reservations before that first drive, how the car would feel or how it would operate, and just their overall practicality compared to a regular internal combustion engine vehicle. But I gotta tell you though, within the first few miles of driving that e-Golf, I was convinced that it made perfect sense to be in an electric vehicle for real-world use. Now, when I say real-world use, I mean daily commuting, especially when you have to deal with a lot of traffic during your commute. See, what I found is that electric cars actually thrive off of stop-and-go traffic, whereas regular cars suffer from it. But despite that experience, it didn't really make me want to go rush out and buy myself an electric car for my commute. As most Bay Area commuters know, the reason that we choose to be on two wheels during our commute isn't really about being eco-friendly, but more about saving that one particular resource that isn't renewable: time. Now, I know what you're thinking. I can save time and be eco-friendly by being on an electric motorcycle. And that's true. But up until recently, the technology was still in its infancy, that I still had reservations about the range of the electric motorcycle's battery, the infrastructure to support it, and just their overall reliability. But I would say that in the past decade or so, the industry has actually made huge strides in the practicality of electric motorcycles. But for me, what sets Energica apart from other motorcycle manufacturers is their offering of the Ego. See, I'm a sport biker at heart. I love all things two-wheeled, but I always gravitate towards a sport motorcycle. Now, Energica isn't the first electric motorcycle manufacturer to offer an electric sport bike, but they are the first one to offer it at a relatively entry-level price point. And in my opinion, the fact that Energica is the sole supplier of electric motorcycles for the Moto E Championship lends them a great deal of credibility and pedigree already. So to me, Energica basically created the Ego to cater to two types of motorcyclists: the practical motorcyclist and the sport riding enthusiast. And I'm both of those motorcyclists. And you know what? The Ego is no joke. There is no compromise to it just because it's an electric motorcycle. Even the 600-pound curb weight raised my eyebrows when I read it on paper, but that's part of the reason that I wanted to test ride it. 600 pounds, I don't think I've ever ridden a bike that heavy. There had to have been a reason that Moto E chose the Ego as the spec bike for its championship despite its weight. And now I know why. All of the bike's weight disappear in motion. And with all of the torque that the Ego has, it's probably a good thing to have that extra weight so you don't launch yourself to the moon when you're riding this thing. Now, I'm not as smart as Rob to be able to expound on the hows or the whys that works, but I have a feeling that Energica they worked really hard towards the mass centralization and the bike geometry to make sure that all of that weight disappears when you're riding the Ego. And during walking speed, when all of that weight actually makes a difference, Energica actually added a park assist feature that allows you to twist the throttle just a little bit so that the bike will actually assist you in rolling it around, whether forward or backward. It's actually really trippy, but very practical. But you know what surprised me during my first ride on the Ego? Was how quickly it felt familiar. It was bizarre to look at this motorcycle that was missing the clutch lever and the foot shifter while I stood next to it. I anticipated during the first ride that I would find my left hand and foot moving for the controls that weren't there, but you know what? They never did. Not even once. It's actually really strange to think that after nearly 2 decades of riding motorcycles with these controls that are now missing on the Ego, that I didn't even find myself missing them, or I didn't find my hands and foot reaching for it. Like, whatever happened to muscle memory? But you know, I thought about it and I figured out why muscle memory didn't kick in. See, when we operate a manual transmission, we shift because of an input that we get. That could either be the sound of the engine or the acceleration perhaps tapering off, or even just the sight of the tachometer needle climbing to red line, or maybe even like a shift light flashing at the dash. Any one of those things prompts us to reach for the lever and shift to the next gear. But with an electric motorcycle, those inputs simply don't exist. There are no gears to get into, there is no engine sound to reference, and the acceleration doesn't really taper off until you reach like dangerous or impractical speeds anyway. So there's nothing for your muscle memory to react to. So for me, riding still felt natural in the Ego. I mean, the only thing that I was really missing was the sound of an internal combustion engine beneath me. Now, I know that the lack of sound is a common point of argument from motorcyclists when it comes to electric bikes, especially for commuters. A lot of riders claim that the sound of their bikes help other drivers make aware that they're there. But personally, for me, I don't really ride that way. Whether or not other drivers can see me or hear me is a moot point, because I ride as if 1, they can't see me, and 2, they can't hear me. And trust me, the sooner that you ride like you're a freaking ghost out in the real world, the better your chances of staying alive and healthy. Anyway, back on the Ego. I was seriously left impressed and wanting to own one. I never really ruled out the possibility of me owning an electric motorcycle, but I didn't really know when the time was going to come that I would be ready. And I feel like I'm ready now. So ready that I've already picked out the color that I want. So ready that I've already lined up the insurance coverage for it, which, by the way, as a pleasant surprise, it's actually a lot cheaper to insure an electric motorcycle than a regular motorcycle that's comparable to it as far as, you know, value and power. And I'm especially so ready that I've already made the financial moves to try and bring one home. Except that I still have one reservation. Is now the time to buy an electric motorcycle? Part of me still feels that great strides are just around the corner for the industry, that there's this kind of a danger of buying too soon, because what I buy now may become outdated in 2 or 3 years' time. You know, it's kind of like what happens when you buy any smart technology, like smartphones. You know, you upgrade your phone, and within a year or 2, the new model renders it maybe not obsolete, but relatively outdated. But at $22,000 MSRP for the Energica Ego, that's a big chunk of money for something that could potentially be outdated in what, 2, 3, maybe 5 years' time? So I'm left asking myself, is it still too soon to get on the movement, or is now the right time to get on board? What do you think?